I played 10 of MetaCritic's worst video games of all time, and a lot of them were worse than I thought. The only rule is that they still had to be available for purchase in some form. Because as much as I want to play Yaris for the Xbox 360, unfortunately I can't because they took it away. Love it or hate it, the Wii was a very interesting console, popularizing motion controls which allowed a lot of games to take creative liberty. Wow, it's like I actually broke my TV. With a lot of questionable branded games coming to the console, one of the most notable being Jenga. Now don't get me wrong, I think Jenga is fine, but I don't think anybody ever wanted it on the Wii, but I'm sure the game can't be as bad as I think. Oh my god, it's worse. Jenga is a game that requires precision. Even the slightest wrong move can knock over the tower and end the game. So you would think they would put 90% of their effort into making a smooth gameplay experience. But this feels like I'm playing Jenga with my elbows. Half the time I put into this game was me just trying to get the motion controls to work at all. Sometimes when I was pulling out a block, it would just shoot the entire tower across the room at lightning speed. When you start a round, you pick a character icon to represent you. And these are mostly fine. There's a Jenga tower, a fish, and dear God, what is that? Who thought this clown was acceptable for an E-rated game? But somehow that's not the scariest part of this because the controls are far worse than anything this clown could ever do to me. Because Jenga is not a complicated game. The Wii has plenty of titles that are far more technical and complex than this that actually somewhat work. But there is no reason that removing one block from a tower should be more difficult than performing open heart surgery. And I wish that there was at least some quality of this game that would make it somewhat bearable to play, but unfortunately there just isn't. Because you want to know what's better than Jenga on the Wii? Any version of regular Jenga. And also tetanus. I am a huge fan of anime, and like a lot of people, Dragon Ball Z was one of the first I had ever seen. And being as successful as it went on to have a ton of spin-off games, one of the most infamous being Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Battle 22. Ultimate Battle 22 shares a lot of similarities with another Dragon Ball series known as Butoden. Both being 2D fighting games, but at least the Butoden games were somewhat playable, because there are a lot of things about this that just feel wrong. Mainly the release date, because though this released in 1995 in Japan, this released in 2003 in North America for the original PlayStation, and they made sure on the box art to preface that this was a Japanese import. I'm sending it back. The PS2 was already 3 years old at this point. But coming out in 2003 means that the game released a year after the original Budokai. And while that game was beloved, this was not. First, there is almost no content in this game whatsoever. There is no story mode, just a collection of various battle modes that are all pretty much the same. You start by picking a character on one of, if not the worst character selection screens I have ever seen. The characters are just standing there in a pack and you have to navigate to what character you want, which is jarring and confusing no matter how many times I pick a character. But don't worry, they remembered to put the trademark logos next to every character's name. And then when the battle begins, it just starts. No countdown, no warning, you are just in the action. Both in visuals and controls, the characters are all very stiff. And though the character models look somewhat fine, they all look really strange standing on 3D backgrounds. I understand what they were going for, but it makes all of the characters look so much worse. Especially because the backgrounds themselves do not look good. Another big problem here is that the fighting game itself is just not fun. It is almost impossible to pull off a combo that feels satisfying at all. And most of the time I spent playing this game, I ended up just having to button mash because there was really no way to play it well. You can fly for some reason that I still don't really get. And like most Dragon Ball games, you have a certain amount of ki that you can use, and when you run out, you just get tired. And honestly, looking at the reviews, I thought this was going to be substantially worse. And though I've played a lot of fan-made Flash games that are a lot better than this, it's really not horrible. The big problem is that they waited so long to release this in the United States. And since this was being compared to every other Dragon Ball game that released at the time, I can see why people were upset. I like to give every game the benefit of the doubt, but one genre I've never really loved are racing games. I like kart racers, but realistic racing games have never been my cup of tea. And the only way I've ever really played the Cruis'n titles was at the arcade. But since I'm still banned from Dave & Buster's, I guess this will have to do. Now, I had never played Cruis'n on the Wii before this, but I know that I had played this game somewhere before. And after doing some extensive research, I found out that this is just the arcade title for Fast and Furious with all of the branding removed. The same cars, the same tracks, and literally everything but the name Fast and Furious. And you can tell this game was not made for the home console. Like most racing games, you start by picking a car. But every time you cycle from car to car, the game freezes for like a second. So something as simple as picking a car and a color can take up to 2 minutes. But even when you start racing, it is still really bad. Every single race starts with the same woman waving a flag, with no change in outfit or mannerisms at all. And honestly, I feel like I could do a better job myself, and when the race actually begins, it does not get much better. The motion controls were not made well. There is barely any middle ground between slightly turning your car and crashing into oncoming traffic, something that I did a lot because there are cars everywhere. One of the tracks has you end up on a railroad, and there were still cars driving on the railroad tracks. But I guess it's fine because you can at least drive a Toyota Celica. I would rather drive a Yaris. And whether it's the crazy load times or the awful AI, every part about this game was just tough to get through. And the only acceptable way to play this is to do so at a Chuck E. Cheese. A lot of people absolutely love the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games, and I am one of them. And that franchise went on to inspire a lot of other games. And one of the most notable ripoffs being Gravity Games' Bike Street Vert Dirt.
That is too many random words.
This game was developed by Midway, the same studio that brought us some absolute hits like Cruis'n on the Wii. And the only appropriate way to explain this game is that if they turned Monster Energy into a game, this would be it. You get to pick your biker and your bike, and you get thrown into a random skate park, where depending on your game mode, you have different options. In the career mode, you have to go through the skate parks collecting various items. And in this mode, they change up the stages to have a little bit higher stakes, like a literal vat of acid. And the best part about this is that when you fall into it, it just says you're crazy.
No, you're crazy.
Like I said, I'm a big fan of arcade sports games, but this is just not a good one. I had to switch my controller because I was convinced it was broken, but no, the input lag is that bad. Landing a trick was nearly impossible because sometimes it just would not register you were hitting a button at all, which would cause you to fall down or lag through the earth, but overall it made the movement not feel satisfying, which was the only part of this game they needed to get right. Part of what made these extreme sports games so much fun is that you could do things that nobody could ever do in real life. And beyond surviving a fall in a vat of acid, I could probably do this all myself, which made this game feel like a massive missed opportunity and overall just a cash grab. And the only thing this game will ever be remembered for is the fact that it has the worst name of a video game I have ever seen. There have been a lot of Game Party titles, but the most infamous of them all is Game Party Champions. And when I first loaded this up, I didn't expect it to be different than any of the other sports collections that I have ever seen on the Wii or the Wii U. But I was surprised that this game actually had a story. And it is not what I expected at all. You start out by picking if you're a boy or a girl, and then have a bunch of characters just awkwardly posing at you. And once you decide who you want to be, you get a brief cutscene of you talking to a friend.
Wait a minute.
I know it was tough growing up without a dad. That had to have sucked.
That is Yuri Lowenthal, the same voice as Sasuke and Spider-Man. And what's even crazier is that this game is not listed on his IMDb. What, are you trying to hide it? Are you embarrassed? Are you ashamed? You should be.
And the story begins with you getting bullied for not having a dad.
Dear God.
And for an E-rated game made by Warner Brothers, that is crazy. But outside of that, the gameplay itself is really bad. There are 8 total minigames, and all of them control pretty poorly. All of the gameplay is done on the gamepad, where you're swiping on the touchscreen in order to play whatever game you want. And I wish I could say that any of these were fun, but most of them are tolerable at best. But the worst of the worst are basketball and ping pong. In basketball, you're swiping on the touchscreen in order to shoot the ball in the hoop, which would be fine if the hoops weren't moving and you could aim at all. You just have to swipe and pray that you'll get anywhere close to the target, because no matter how hard you swipe or when you stop swiping, it just kinda goes where it wants. And in ping pong, they just don't show you the paddle, so you just have to pray that you're swiping in the right direction in order to actually hit the ball. There's no way to aim, you just have to hope you're not hitting the ball the wrong way. And while most of the other games are somewhat playable, none of them are fun. And after playing it, I can see why this game was rated so poorly. Even though the GameCube is one of my favorite consoles of all time, there were a lot of games on there that were just bad. But one of, if not the worst game on the console, was Charlie's Angels. This game was based off the Charlie's Angels movies from the early 2000s. And those movies were based on the TV show from the 1970s, which means they had about 30 years to make sure this didn't happen. But unfortunately, the stars aligned, and this is what we got. The game starts off, and no, I didn't make this up, with all of New York City's power going out, and somebody steals the Statue of Liberty.
Now, if that's not quality cinema, I don't know what is.
And the Angels are tasked with figuring out who is stealing all of the monuments from across the world. And of course, the only way to do that is to go undercover in a bikini contest. And even though you're supposed to be covert, as soon as you step off the stage, you're immediately attacked by everybody in the vicinity. And this is what the game is the entire time. And I don't know what's worse, the gameplay or the cutscenes and voice acting. Because they had notable A-list celebrity actors like Cameron Diaz in this game. But it seems like they intentionally picked the worst dialogue option for every character in every scene. In all of the levels, you play as each of the Angels doing their own separate tasks. It's a simple side-scrolling beat-em-up with some of the worst camera angles I have ever seen, with multiple unskippable segments where you have to climb a ladder for almost a minute at a time. And at one point I put my controller down for 6 seconds and Lucy Liu started doing this. I don't know what it is, but it's the best part of this game.
Am I pretty yet?
Like I said earlier, Cruis'n was originally a Fast and Furious game. But somehow, that's not even the worst Fast and Furious game ever made. That title goes to Fast and Furious Showdown.
This game is ludicrous. Oh my god, it is ludicrous!
This is an original story set in the world of Fast and Furious, and you get to play as a bunch of fan-favorite characters doing what they do best, ignoring the rules of the road. I really tried to give this the benefit of the doubt, but this is so bad. With a game like Cruis'n, I could write off the jank because at least it was using motion controls, something that was somewhat difficult. But here the driving is just bad. The cars feel stiff, the missions are really strange, and there is barely any story whatsoever. There are small scenes where two cops are trying to pin together what's happening, but between every mission, I was just confused. One of the early missions has you rip a vault out of a building, and along with a computer, you have to drive it out of the city. And this mission almost sent me into a mental breakdown. The physics in this game are incredibly janky. This is most likely due to the fact that they wanted you to be able to launch cars an incredible distance, but this made most of the missions almost unplayable. Because during most of the game, there are NPC cars just out and about, and if you crash into them, it will ruin your day. There's a decent variety in the kinds of missions you do, where some have you jumping from car to car, others have you doing a street race, and some have you destroying cars with a minigun or a grappling hook, something I wish I could enjoy, but I can't figure out what's worse, the aiming or the driving. But the entire time I was playing this game, the only thought I had was that if this had some good controls, I feel like it would be somewhat okay. But they ended up releasing a game that feels like it's the beta version of what it should have been.
You gotta buy the game, not for yourself, but for the family. Get out or I will call the police.
One of the most infamously bad games of all time was Ride to Hell Retribution. And this is the perfect game for divorced dads. You play as Jake Conway, who just gets out of the military and goes home to see his family. And shortly after getting home, his brother throws a tantrum, steals a motorcycle, and goes off to see his tutor. You then catch up with him and have a heart-to-heart, and you run into the rival gang, the Devil's Hand. And seeing that your brother is wearing a rival gang shirt, they decide to slit his throat. They kill your brother because your dad was a member of a rival gang. And though they explicitly mention that you're siblings, for some reason they just let you go and begin your quest to get revenge. And to do so, you ride motorcycles, get in fights, and most importantly, have consensual relations while fully clothed.
Well, alright.
Now, I'm not gonna spoil the events of the game because I truly believe that everybody should buy this and play it once because it is bad in the best possible way. The mechanics are clunky, the story is bad, and every part about this game should be awful. But it's like watching a bad movie where it's so bad that you just cannot stop playing. A lot of these games, like Charlie's Angels, have had really bad voice acting. And so does this, but somehow it is almost perfect. Early on in the game, you have to chase down a biker, and once you catch up to him, you slit his throat and you make this noise.
Somebody please give this voice actor an Emmy.
You can tell that underneath all of the suck that there could have been something good. And this is by no means a good game, and honestly, it is pretty far from it. And maybe it's because I've been waiting to play it for years, or that people have been making fun of it for over a decade. If there was any bad game to play, this would be it.
Do you believe in magic? No. But what about magic gasoline? Get that out of my house.
Vroom in the Night Sky is one of the weirdest video games I have ever seen. Because from the moment I turned it on, I thought I was having a stroke. Are you the first time to play this game?
Apologize.
You play as a magical girl on a mission to collect stardust, and that is literally all you do. There are a couple of different stages and you fly around the map through various rings, a mechanic I feel is ripped straight out of Superman 64, and the only thing that matters is flying through these rings as fast as possible. And what's crazy about this is that they could have added literally any other metric to make this fun, like seeing how much stardust you can collect in a certain amount of time, or racing to see who can collect all of the stardust on the map. But as it stands, there's about 30 minutes of playtime in this game, and that's being generous. The best part about this is absolutely the dialogue, because it seems like it was localized by a group of children. Every map is structured the exact same way. You fly around to all of the 10 rings, and you do nothing else because that is the best way to play. Because your only goal is to do it as fast as possible, there is no reason to explore the world. And though there are other shards scattered around the world, you don't need to collect them ever. It feels like they were halfway to a somewhat decent game. But because they actively incentivize you to not play the game by making things like the magical gasoline and the magical gas stations pretty much pointless, I really can't think of a single person that would actually enjoy this game. But according to MetaCritic, there is one game that is even worse. Family Party 30 Great Games Obstacle Arcade.
Or as they call it in every other country in the world, torture.
Now, I for some reason convinced myself that this wasn't gonna be as bad as people said, but I guess I just didn't know what I was getting myself into because this is just horrid. Saying that this is 30 great games has to be some form of false advertising, because there wasn't a single minigame in this collection that was playable, let alone great. Now, this released on the Wii U, but I am convinced that this was originally a game made for the Wii that they just shifted over. Because not only is this game disgusting to look at, they also just randomly switch when you need to use the gamepad or the Wiimote and nunchuck with no warning. And I could get past that if playing the games was somewhat fun, but all of the controls, whether it's on the gamepad or the Wiimote, barely work. Most of the games here are blatant ripoffs of something that was in a Mario Party game, with one of my favorite examples being a ripoff of Crane Game, which just does not work. You drop your character to pick up dice, and there were multiple times where I would drop my character exactly on it, watch the hand go through the dice, and it would not register. And it's like that for every single game.
I can't believe I'm saying this. I would rather play Pokemon Dash.
For some reason, if you want to skip the annoying bits and play just the minigames, you can't do that. In order to unlock the minigames in free play, you have to get them in challenge mode. Which means in order to play the games you want, you have to drag yourself through some of the worst gameplay I have ever seen. Most of these games offered something that at least made the game playable. But after suffering through this, I can see why this is the worst video game of all time.
Might I interest you in something better? The electric chair? What? No, I'm talking about the best games of all time. Aw, dang it.